Good evening. Welcome, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. My name is Amber Mays. I'm the Holocaust Educator and Human Rights Associate for the Indianapolis Jewish Community Relations Council, as well as the co-founder and Chief Program Officer of the Crane Center for Mass Atrocity Prevention. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge our friends who are fasting in observance of the holy month of Ramadan. We wish you an easy fast and a blessed and generous month. So we're all here this evening to learn about the genocide committed against the Rohingya, who are a Muslim ethnic minority who mainly reside in Rakhine State in Myanmar, also known as Burma, as well as the recent coup that took place at the beginning of February of this year. The Rohingya are seen as illegal foreigners by the Burmese military and have faced systematic persecution and violence since the military first seized power in 1962. The most recent wave of genocidal violence began in 2017 after the military swept through Rakhine State, killing thousands of Rohingya civilians, raping women and young girls, and burning villages to the ground. Over 700,000 fled to neighboring Bangladesh, generating a humanitarian crisis that Bangladesh is still struggling to effectively address. To provide further insight into the root causes of the genocide and how the military coup further complicates matters, we turn now to our panelists. We have today, this evening, Wei Wei Nu, who is a former political prisoner turned human rights activist and the founder and executive director of the Women's Peace Network. She has received many honors and recognitions for her work, including being recognized as a champion of prevention by the United Nations Office of the Prevention of Genocide and Responsibility to Protect. And we are truly honored to have her here tonight. Hannah Weilbacher, who is the convener of the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network, a national coalition of Jewish organizations dedicated to advocating on behalf of the Rohingya, and Marcus Steiner, who is the CEO of the Crane Center for Mass Atrocity Prevention and a subject matter expert on Southeast Asian genocides and technology use in mass atrocity prevention. So Wei Wei, I'd like to start with you. As a member of the Rohingya ethnic group and a former political prisoner, you have a unique perspective on the military, on the genocide, on the struggle for democracy. Can you provide some context as to what's currently happening in Myanmar? What's going on the ground right now?
Thank you, Amber. And thank you, Crane Center, and all of you Jewish Rohingya Justice Network for doing this work and for helping our communities and Myanmar in this, and especially, convening this event on the month of genocide awareness or remembrance. As we remember those we lost in the history and those we continue to lose, in my own country, in Myanmar, it's my honor, it's my to be here. Talking about military in Myanmar, the military institutions in Myanmar is incredibly important or vital in all of the atrocity crimes that has happened in the past against many ethnic communities and Rohingya, as well as the ongoing atrocities and crimes against the people of Myanmar, all people of Myanmar. And when the military, when we had the first military coup in 1962, it wasn't clear which directions they were going to, and for the Rohingya community, And for many ethnic other minorities, they felt the hate and they started to feel the persecutions, deprivations of their rights in their regions, respectively, wherever they are in ethnic minorities areas. And in the case of Rohingya, it was in 1977 and 78 when they started this operations called Dragon operations, or in Burmese, Nagamin operations, where they came to Rakhine State with this massive operation, so-called operations that scrutinize people and by through very forcible use of actions, or by even deploying militaries and many security forces in Rakhine State. During these Dragon operations in 1978, the military in Myanmar, they went village to village. They deployed this military, every villages. They went to village and houses to houses to check their family lists, whether these Rohingya, these people are people of Myanmar or not. And along these operations, there has been so many level of abuses, tortures, extortions, rape, and confiscations of properties, land confiscations, and so on. So Rohingya were terrified, and a lot of them fled Bangladesh. There were about 250,000 Rohingya refugees in 1978. But then the UNHCR facilitated their return to Myanmar, and majority of them were able to return to Myanmar. It was because the Rohingya had citizenship card. Rohingya had the citizenship card as other people. And so they had to, the Burmese military leadership at that time had to receive the Rohingya returnees. And what they came up was a master plan after that, after receiving the refugees. And they come up with this very discriminatory citizenship law that excludes Rohingya from an ethnic nationality of Myanmar. Basically, by removing Rohingya from ethnic nationality of Myanmar, based on these new citizenship law, the Rohingyas lost de facto birth citizen to the country. But they may become perhaps naturalized citizenship or other form of citizenship. Like there are different sections, but the main key thing here is they lost the birthright to be citizens. Once you are born, you are already citizens. So they lost it because the citizenship law is based on, birth citizenship is based on this ethnic nationality of the country. And since then, the Burmese military has introduced many forms of basically the divide and rule, divide and conquer tactics in Rakhine State and across the country, and started to, perhaps even before that, this state orchestrated this Buddhist nationalist or Burmanizations movement across the country, and particularly in Rakhine State. So after 30 years of that divide and rule practices, and after 30 years of this systemic the deprivations of rights of Rohingya in Rakhine State has resulted, this severe form of, has enabled these the genocide since after this 2012 the violence in Rakhine State. So basically what I'm trying to say is the military institutions in Myanmar has played a very critical role in orchestrating all of this repressions to the divide and conquer, hate, and deep-rooted ethnic divisions in Myanmar, and that's what they utilize as a tool to obtain their popularity over the past 10 years. since 2010 to 2011 to 2000 until now, until the military coup, over the past 10 years of democratic opening. And they utilize this deep ethnic divisions and hate towards the Rohingya as a form of promoting themselves and gaining their popularity, while they knew that they started to realize in 2012 the military is completely unpopular in Myanmar in compared to the NLD. They try many things, including the active genocide against Rohingya during 2017, 2016, 2017, and it's still ongoing anyway. But they try all of these things, and I mean it's complex. It's one side they have a deep hate and racism against Rohingya. On the other hand, they try to use that for their own benefit, right? So they have like multiple purposes on this all these genocidal processes, and they failed it. And at the end, you know, during these 10 years, the international community has again failed to hold these military perpetrators accountable. We were saying that, yes, military is the one, we know this is the one that created all of these things, and now it's the time for us to hold them accountable, to end the impunity and to bring justice for the communities. And basically, you know, then we will only be able to have a proper democratizations and democracy in Myanmar. And nobody listened to us, like no international communities. International communities was extremely slow and weak in terms of response. And domestically, and of course, democratically elected leaders, the Burmese leader, the Aung San Suu Kyi, and the majority Burmese were supporting the military and military narrative and covering up military's crimes just because they believed in military's propaganda, and they believed that Rohingyas are outsiders, or they have this, you know, they embodied this deep-rooted hate against the Rohingya. And all of these things, complex situations, has enabled the military to stage a coup. If we were able to hold them accountable, you know, before 2019, 2020, I think, you know, we had a greater chance that we would be able to prevent this coup, and we will be able to prevent this, you know, atrocities, ongoing atrocities in Myanmar. Right now, you know, people are giving everything, risking everything they have to fight against the military coup. You know, it's basically innocent people have to pay the price because of the poor choices of the political leaders, because of the poor policies by the international community. Now innocent people have to pay the price in Myanmar, and we don't know when, you know, we will be able to return these situations unless everybody, entire world is with us at this point. And as you know, in less than 3 months now, 2.5 months, we have over 4,000 people have been arrested, and over 700 people, almost 800, have been killed. And these are younger people, students, and it's include like 7 years old to you know, elderlies, and a lot of these are young people that's supposed to be going to the school, and they've been targeted and indiscriminate shooting in many places, and mass arrest and torture, and people have been taken away, arrested, and the next day they return, the dead bodies return. All of this, you know, mass human rights violations is ongoing now. And I think, I truly hope that at this point, everyone within Myanmar and outside Myanmar realize, you know, this is it, this is enough. And now is the time to really take the actions and do everything to prevent the further atrocities in Rakhine State, or further the ongoing genocide against the Rohingya, or the ongoing violence against the people of Myanmar.
Thank you so much, Wei Wei. It has been absolutely heartbreaking seeing the videos and the images and all of the pleas for help. And you know, we stand in solidarity with the Burmese people and with the civil disobedience movement. And I know we will talk a little bit later about some of the ways that people can get involved to try and prevent any more atrocities from occurring. So Marcus, I'm going to turn to you now. Can you provide a little bit of context, geopolitical context from like a mass atrocity prevention perspective? So how has this happened? How has genocide perpetrated against the Rohingya, the current crimes against humanity that we are seeing in Myanmar since the coup, how has that happened, and why hasn't the world stepped in when we've seen the signs?
Well, I think it's really important to understand, as Wei Wei mentioned, that this is not the first round of violence against Rohingya or against ethnic minorities in Burma. Indeed, if you really break it down, this is the third to fourth large scale operation. You had the Operation Nagamen, you had Operation Clean the Beautiful Nation in the 90s, and now you have the 2016, 2017 to today. And so really the Tatmadaw, the Burmese military, had already set a precedent of how they go about framing the violence. So rarely do they frame this as an internal civil conflict as much as a police measure. As Wei Wei said, with the 1982 Burmese citizenship law, the Rohingya are officially on paper not Burmese citizens, which just furthers the conspiracy theory of the Rohingya are Bengali illegal immigrants that came over during colonization. Despite documentations reaching back to, at the very least, the 14th century, placing Rohingya in what is now Rakhine State. So over the last 50 years, the Tatmadaw has developed a bit of a formula for how this violence occurs. You're always going to see a preceding event that will be blamed on the Rohingya or a Rohingya adjacent organization. This time it was ARSA was blamed for assaulting border outposts in Rakhine, and that was used to mobilize as an excuse to mobilize troops in what they're calling an anti-terror operation. In the 90s and in the 70s, it was immigration violations that they were addressing, allegedly. And so they've found that if they utilize local and federal laws in Burma to activate not just military but police units, then it kind of puts up a bit of a smokescreen as to intent, which is key to determining whether there's actually genocidal violence and key to kind of triggering our international obligations of the 1948 genocide. And words are escaping me. But when we codified genocide in 1948 as an international crime. So by obfuscating that and by having these very rapid, large-scale sets of violence where the intent is not just to destroy but also to displace, then you also create kind of confusion as to whether are they just trying to displace, which the UN will often write off as ethnic cleansing, or is the intent actually to destroy this group, which then falls under the realm of genocide. And since 1962 under Ne Win, the Ne Win military junta, they've had time and time again opportunities to test this and to see what can they do, how far can the military go without eliciting a large-scale international response. And indeed, in 1978 and Operation Dragon King Naga Men, they did push it far enough that the UN and Bangladesh started making demands back. I think we're seeing that happen now again, but this time it's not necessarily because of the scale, but how long it's been going on. We are 5 years in, and there's a lot more noise being made this time. During the Cold War, it was very easy for Americans, it was very easy for Westerners to ignore what was happening in Southeast Asia if no one was tying it to the Soviet Union. Now that there is all this focus internationally on what's happening in China, what is China doing, where are they reaching, East and Southeast Asia becomes a new area of interest for political scientists, for defense experts, for intelligence communities, and therefore strategically Burma becomes more important. It's not right. It should have, we should have been taking care of this in the 1960s before we even reached the first round of genocidal violence. But we are definitely seeing now a lot more interest in what's happening. I saw a question come through asking about what the Biden administration is doing. So I'll just go ahead and hit on that because it does pertain to the geopolitics of what's happening. We have seen sanctions coming out against military-owned companies in Burma, intended on choking off funding to the military. One thing that has made the Tatmadaw so difficult to topple and such a difficult adversary for human rights organizations is the fact that they hold 3 pillars of power in Burma. They are the military, number one. They are the sole defense force of official defense force of Burma. Therefore, they hold all the military power there. Many high-ranking officials also are high-ranking officials or owners of major companies in Burma. That gives them the power to control large segments of Burma's economy. And then finally, even under the Constitution, which guarantees the Tatmadaw 1/4 of seats of parliament, they hold major political influence. Looking at the recent elections, they hold disproportionate political influence compared to their support. So they hold those 3 pillars of power, making them very difficult to unseat from an internal or external perspective. So ultimately, where we get hung up from an international perspective is there seems to be, and I've spoke with many of my friends from the Rohingya diaspora on this as well. There's no apparent path to being able to stop the genocide, effectively, safely, and equitably repatriate the Rohingya and others from diaspora communities that have been forced out, as long as the Tatmadaw is allowed to continue to exist and operate as it has for the last 60 years. Because even if we ignore the issues of Aung San Suu Kyi and her past writings, as that come off very much as a Weimar nationalist, even if she had the full gumption, the desire, and the drive to curtail what the military was doing, there's nothing that says she had the power to do so at the end of the day. And I think the February 1st coup shows us that had she actually tried to step in, then we would be where we are now several months earlier, perhaps years earlier. That doesn't excuse her silence by any stretch. That doesn't excuse her leading the defense and going to the World Court, never once saying the word Rohingya. That doesn't defend that, but that shows us exactly what kind of geopolitical powerhouse the Tatmadaw has become in Myanmar, in Burma, and how ingrained they are in everything that has to happen there. To end this violence and to bring everyone home.
Thank you. Hannah, I'm going to turn to you now. Marcus kind of provided us with the overall geopolitical perspective. And I'd like to ask you a little bit more about the Jewish community, their response to the Rohingya genocide and the coup. You convened the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network. what are some of the, well, first, why is the genocide of the Rohingya, why is that important to the Jewish community? And what are some of the work that the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network is doing around these pressing issues?
Thank you for those questions. And thank you to Marcus and Weiwei for your wisdom so far. I'll try to build on it. My name is Hannah. I will talk about, as you mentioned, Amber, what the JRJN is and why we do what we do. And then I'll mention some of what we're advocating for at the US government level right now, which connects also with what Marcus was just sharing. So the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network, or the JRJN, is the powerful consortium of Jewish NGOs that are advocating for the rights of the Rohingya people of Burma, Myanmar, at the US government level. So that's what we do. JRJN's membership includes 30 organizations and all 4 major branches of American Judaism, which is amazing. And together we encompass the support of millions of American Jews, all standing together against genocide. And I hope it's not a super surprise for anyone listening here why this is motivating for so many American Jews. We are inspired by the Jewish commitment to justice and Jewish history. The JRJN works to promote a robust US and international response to the Rohingya genocide through education of our communities and also advocacy in Washington, D.C. And we believe that unified American leadership will bring us closer to achieving justice for the Rohingya people. And we know all too well from our own history what happens when the international community fails to stand unequivocally in defense of groups that are subject to state-sanctioned hate and oppression and violence and genocide. Throughout Jewish history, we've known what it's like to face genocide and expulsion and exclusion from society. So, what Weiwei was describing, this persecution and government-sanctioned brutality against Rohingya people, echoes a lot of the persecution that's been suffered by Jews throughout history. So the JRJN is acting powerfully on our promise that never again means no genocide ever again against any people. And we're seeing that the suffering and the mass murder and the forced displacement of the predominantly Muslim Rohingya community, it speaks to us so deeply as Jews, as people who have long faced religious and ethnic persecution. So these words, never again, that I know I grew up hearing and really believing are a call to action against the crimes against humanity and the genocide that's perpetrated against any people in any country. So what we're doing is the Jewish community is calling, as a unified voice, calling on the US government to respond to the magnitude of this genocide by leading in bringing justice for the Rohingya people. So we were founded in the aftermath of the violence that Weiwei was describing in 2017. And our hope is to continue to be at the forefront of this fight, working together to build a unified response to the Rohingya crisis from American Jews. So to talk a little bit about what we've done and what our asks are right now, the top line is that we continue to press both the executive branch as well as Congress to take meaningful action. There's a lot of things that we're trying to push. And as we were getting on just before this started at 7 p.m. my time here on the East Coast, Aaron and Weiwei and I were talking about a lobby day that we did together in Washington, D.C. in February of 2020, like 2 weeks before we would not have been able to do that again. So being able to lobby and advocate together has been very, very powerful, even though we haven't been able to be in person for quite some time now. But I'll always remember walking Capitol Hill as a JRJN with Weiwei and other folks it was a really powerful day. So to illustrate that a little more, we're very proud that the Jewish community has been mobilizing and advocating in the years since this decades-long campaign of discrimination and violence against the Rohingya people escalated into a genocide, which, as we've mentioned, was August of 2017. And so we're advocating at the US government level as a political constituency who cares about this, right? Like, we need members of Congress to understand that there is a constituency, there's a group of people who will call their offices when a vote happens and they didn't vote the right way, who are watching this because it's not, we don't want it to be under the radar. So I can start with the executive branch side and then I'll go to Congress real quick. So on the executive branch side, we have worked with the Treasury Department to ask them to impose sanctions on some of the military officials who are responsible. Had a lot of conversations over the years about sanctions, and some of those were quite successful, as Marcus was mentioning. Also on the executive branch side, we have worked with the Department of State, trying to push them in various ways. So as a little bit of backstory, the State Department released a report in September of 2018, maybe you remember this, documenting the atrocities in Northern Rakhine State, which attested that the violence against the Rohingya people was, these are their words, extreme, large-scaled, widespread, well-planned. So we were deeply disappointed that the report failed to legally determine that there were international crimes committed against the Rohingya people by the Burmese military when this report came out. There were horrifying atrocities outlined in the report with the full weight and expertise of the Department of State behind it, and we thought it surely must trigger meaningful US response and actions, but it didn't. And this was when the Secretary of State was Mike Pompeo, who was overseeing the department. And now the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has an opportunity to do the right thing. So we are calling on him to defend the rights and the dignity of the Rohingya people and all ethnic minorities, and declare a genocide. So kind of coincidentally, the JRJN letter, the JRJN sent a letter today that was signed by like 2 hours ago. That was signed by 860 American Jews asking the State Department to make a genocide determination. And thank you to Amber and Aaron for your support with that letter. So we're urging the State Department to act decisively to forge a path for justice and accountability in Burma by doing a number of things, including, further sanctions and using their full range of all the diplomatic channels they can use to work with regional allies and collectively urge the Burmese government to reinstate full citizenship for the Rohingya people. The coup has made this much harder and much more complicated, but we're still, one foot in front of the other. As well as, so I guess I can speak on how the coup has made our advocacy just a little different, but mostly I take my lead from Weiwei on things like this. But it's important to understand that the coup has been perpetrated by the same military that carried out this genocide, right? So it doesn't mean we focus on one thing and not the other. And it makes our advocacy even more dire. We know we have to respond. So that was the executive branch side that I went through very quickly, a little top line, and I'll go on the Congress side, and then we'll wrap up my section. So also, in some ways, this is actually also coincidental. This is kind of amazing. It's a great day to have this conversation. Today, Senator Markey, Massachusetts senator, with a few of his colleagues, introduced a piece of legislation also calling on the State Department to determine whether the attacks by the Burmese military and the security forces against the Rohingya people is a genocide. So we're supporting that. And then the other thing that we're supporting, that anyone at any time, you can pick up the phone and call your members of Congress about these pieces of legislation that I'm talking about now. We're supporting pieces of legislation that hopefully soon will be reintroduced in the House and the Senate. The last few years, we were pushing this piece of, this bill forward that had a lot of things in it that would support what the Rohingya leaders and activists are pushing for. So in the last Congress, they have to reintroduce it because it's a new Congress that started this January, but in the last Congress, in the Senate, it was called the Burma Human Rights and Freedom Act, for the policy nerds who want to know these things like me. And in the House, it was called the Burma Act. But it was very similar pieces of legislation. And actually in 2019, the full House of Representatives passed this bill. It was amazing. And they sent it to the Senate, and the Senate didn't do anything. Despite our best efforts, I would say. That's what we were lobbying for when that I mentioned we were together in February 2020. So the bill has not been reintroduced yet, so I can't tell you exactly what this bill will say and what it will call for, but I can tell you that in the last Congress, it called for a number of things, more targeted sanctions against military officials and military-owned enterprises, demanding involvement of the Rohingya community and taking an active part in crafting the solutions to the crisis. And it also authorized some crucial increases to humanitarian assistance for Rohingya refugees, as well as called for international justice mechanisms. So our goal here is to push for everything that the United States government can be doing, we should be doing, with, of course, the direct leadership and deep partnership with Rohingya leaders, who ultimately we are standing in solidarity with. So we're continuing to advocate at the US government level. It's very powerful for a community of American Jews to come together and say that we care about this. We know that Congress listens. So that's what the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network is doing right now.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And of course, we greatly appreciate all of the work that you and other members of JRJN have been doing on this issue. Wei, there we go. If you could take a few moments, a lot of the questions that we are starting to get in are about, you know, what can we do to support the civil disobedience movement? What can we do? You know, what kind of pressure can we put on our elected officials to actually make some sort of difference on the ground? If you could provide some sort of concrete action steps that we can all take.
Sure, thank you. Thank you very much for the questions and for your insights, Hannah and Marcus. So I think, you know, first, before I'm going to the recommendations, what you can do, I just want to, again, you know, highlight that how important and how crucial is for us to see the situations as it is right now, and to realize the role of the military, how they are, you know, their history and their ongoing behavior and attitudes. So two part. One, you know, it is crucial that we recognize what the military has done to Rohingya, to Karen, Kachin, and many other ethnic communities. And in particular on the Rohingya, it is crucial that the crimes that happens against the Rohingya amount to genocide, crimes against humanity, you know, that has been laid out in the United Nations fact-finding missions report, as well as the State Department led the investigations and report along with the PILPD, a law firm. So that is why it is crucial, one, you know, to push the state, to push the government, US government, to recognize the crimes as it is, the genocide, and to also not undermine or recognize all other crimes committed against the other ethnic communities in Myanmar. And from there, where it is, you know, but after, you know, the recognition is the first step. Only then we can be able to approach the you know, effective approach to the current situations on the coup. So without acknowledging the past crimes and past in behavior, we won't be able to respond in an effective or appropriate approach. So now, as you guys have already mentioned, you know, this is the most important time, or this time is you know, important than ever to respond to the militaries in a way that they should be responded, because this is the very same military that committed genocide and other crimes, crimes against humanity and war crimes against the other ethnic communities. If we let them, you know, continue, then we will see more tragedy, more atrocity, and you know, the genocide in Rakhine State will escalate, further escalate, and it's been already showing many signs in Rakhine State. and the ethnic communities like, you know, Kachin and Karen are targeted now. Civil war has intensified. The military is using the airstrikes against the ethnic arms groups and targeting civilians, villages. All of this atrocity will continue. So therefore, it is more than ever, this is the more, you know, the very critical time for every one of us take everything, take actions and do everything we can. So now what you can do, as I said, you know, like, so first things, yes, raise the awareness. You know, the first thing we can do is like perhaps try to learn more, to talk to the people on the ground more, and then raise awareness what is happening through your network, on social media, through your, you know, government contacts everywhere, raising awareness, and then you know, doing advocacy or writing to the your representative or government directly is important. You know, what you can write, ending impunity, military's impunity, and recognizing the crimes and ending impunity, and taking effective actions and concerted actions against the Myanmar military. So there are a few calls that we, civil society organizations and people in Myanmar are calling for. One, you know, the United States is doing already doing some, which is the economic sanctions against military and military businesses, the sanctions against military and military businesses. So right now, luckily, U.S. government has taken some initiative to impose sanctions against a few major military companies and military individuals. But it's not obviously enough, given the seriousness and scale of the crimes that has been ongoing. So what we're calling for is a more concerted, comprehensive sanctions against the military. So not only as a U.S., but also, you know, urging U.S. to work with the allies and partners, so a more multilateral response. On the other hand, we are also calling U.S. government to take a leadership role in the UN Security Council and to push for a stronger resolutions that include global arms embargo, as well as economic sanctions, and a referral of the situations to the International Criminal Court, where the International Criminal Court has already initiated an investigations on the situations of Rohingya. So, you know, to summarize, accountability is the most important, and criminal accountability is important to move forward, and economic sanctions, global arms embargo. So that is the policy level. On the other hand, what you can do for the people, supporting CDN movement, you know, supporting your time, donating your time and your skills and your money, your resources. So, you know, the over 300 townships in Myanmar, thousands of civil servants have quit their job or stopped going to the job and joined civil disobedience movement. So, you know, it's been over 2 months now, and the need is so high. These people need support to be able to survive on their determinations and defiance that they have taken. So, you know, donations is key. At the same time, you know, get involved with the organizations that you know and you're interested to work with, and support them to be able to make their work more effective. So that's the second way. And otherwise, you know, just be, you know, generally just be supportive, morally supportive, any way that you can. You know, any support at this point for the people of Burma is very, very important. And one important thing I would want to end is that when you support, it's important to be able to, you know, when you provide support to the Burmese people, it's important to decentralize or democratize the support so that as many people as can get, not only donating one group, but many groups, as well as, you know, supporting people in the very rural area and in ethnic area. So, you know, oftentimes they are left behind. So yeah, that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Wei Wei. I can feel from the questions that are coming in, you know, everyone is really wanting to know what they can do. And so thank you for providing some of those concrete answers, concrete action steps that people can take. We are going to now turn it over to our question and answer session. We've had some wonderful questions already start to come in. The first question we are going to go with is, so someone asked, if the government supported the military, why was it overthrown in the first place? Why was there a coup? Anyone would like to answer that? We're gonna.
Well, Wei, if you'd like to, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay. I think it's important to understand that even with the limited civilian support of the military, with Aung San Suu Kyi's party winning as many seats as they did, it still threatens the power of the military infrastructure there. The military, like I said, relies on maintaining these three major pillars of power. And when it was virtually a clean sweep for Suu Kyi's party, that risks upsetting the balance. You know, I say that they have this down to a science. Virtually any time you see, in, you know, really the last 60 years, the top Madaw's power potentially being called into question, whether it be officially through elections like they've attempted to do now, or when Ne Win was forced to step down in the 80s. You see, you know, this resurgence in violence, this kind of re-coup. You know, in the 80s and early 90s, it didn't transfer power just really smoothly from Ne Win to Saw Long. You know, there was effectively a new governing council put into place. There was a new revolution that took place. Now there's a new coup taking place, and, you know, kind of kickstarting this cycle. So while yes, there is popular support for, you know, the Weimar nationalism that's exhibited by the military, there is also this desire of democratic governance. You know, the military put Suu Kyi on house arrest for years in the 90s as the leader of, you know, the democracy movement in Burma. And you know, she represents, while some ideologies are similar, she represents kind of the Burmese hope against military rule, and kind of that hope, that beacon of self-determination, which, you know, the military government works very hard to keep from the people.
Thank you. We have a question, a little bit of a long question here. So given that China and Russia are blocking any resolution in the UN Security Council, how can we best support the civil disobedience movement to stop the genocide, not only against the Rohingya, but also the violence against Buddhists, Hindus, Catholics, and all other ethnic minorities in Myanmar? Says, my understanding is that the democracy movement had torn up the Constitution of 2008, and the democracy movement wishes to form a recognized government through the CRPH. The situation requires recognizing legitimate elected members of government in Myanmar and restore the movement for democracy, which includes the Rohingya as full citizens. So how, I guess the boiling that down is, you know, I guess how are we able to maybe better lobby the UN? Go ahead, Wei Wei. It looks like you have an answer.
I think two parts. We need to do both simultaneously. We need to push the UN as hard as possible. You know, the Russian and China, they usually block it. It's their policy. They would do it all the time. You know, they do it every time. But the thing is that if you know, the other states are committed, if other states take initiative, at some point they had to agree on the resolutions, given the documentations, the evidences, the amount of evidences that we have that you know, that amount to this that show the gravity and the seriousness of the crimes. Undeniable crimes. At the end of the day, the China and Russia has to agree. So what we need is the other states to be committed, to be pushing continuously, and the citizens, you know, the Burmese citizens and the international citizens, US citizens, all of you need to push the governments to take leadership and to be consistent and to, you know, to carry out these missions. Otherwise, without holding the military leaders accountable, we won't be able to end these military institutions, the militarism or military dictatorship in Myanmar. And on the other hand, the support for the CDM, the protesters, and the people of Myanmar, it will be a long journey, and you will have to bear with us, and you will have to be with us. And you know, you need to be able to support, you know, as much as possible to both civil disobedience movement and you know, individuals and ethnic communities, groups, as much as possible. You know, I have already mentioned ways to it's not just money, but also, you know, your time and your skills and everything, and all of this will need for a long time. Now it seems like we're in a battle with the battle for freedom and justice and equality for entire nations, and it will not happen, you know, within a month or so. So it is a long battle, and you need to bear with us.
Are there any specific organizations? I have quite a few questions coming in asking about specific organizations, NGOs that people can donate financially or volunteer their time with to help the CDM.
So there are so many, right? So many means, like, yeah, feel free to contact us if you need assistance in this. Otherwise, there are CRPH fundraiser and different organizations, including the one called Global Movement for Democracy in Myanmar. They put up the list of the organizations that you can donate, and in terms of organizations to volunteer or to assist, there are plenty of them. You know, there are ethnic organizations, and there are, you know, many of them are not, like, you know, the young people, the protest movement, they're not listed on the website because of their safety and security. So, you know, you need to be able to talk to people, your friends and colleagues, and identify individuals and groups and support directly.
Another question here, it says, Marcus mentioned the 3 pillars that show how hard it is to remove the Tatmadaw from power. She would like to add one and get your thoughts. One that has been written about more often now, that those in the police and in the Tatmadaw are heavily desensitized to leave the force, even if they want to. Their jobs, lives, families are all tied up with the military. They live separately. They are socialized to think of EAOs, ethnic minority groups, as terrorists, etc. But we are actually seeing a few defections every day. How can we celebrate these and encourage those within the military to speak out? Is this a realistic strategy? If enough in the military did speak out, could it potentially bring down this Leviathan? Thank you, Susan, for that question. Anyone? It's a big one to tackle.
So sorry, Amber, would you elaborate it a little bit?
So she's basically asking, you know, that there are some members of the Tatmadaw who are defecting every day. So how can we encourage those within the military to continue to defect, to continue to speak out? Is it realistic to even do so? And do we think that if there are enough members of the military who do speak out, that we could potentially disrupt their power structure and bring them down?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. You know, in many countries at this stage, if a military is committing this very public, brutal crimes against its own people for months, and you know, in other situations, we see like, you know, the militaries within there is coup within within coup, or you will see that scenario like that, or you know, like the high-level military officials would defect or join the movement, and that's the scenario in other other revolutions and protests and, you know, coups contexts. But in the case of Myanmar, it's very interesting. Yes, we see, like, you know, in Chun State and in Karenni State, Kaya State, you know, and in a few other places, lower level officials, the military soldiers and police are defecting. However, we haven't seen any high level officials yet. And mainly it is because the military is an ecosystem. They have created the ecosystems for themselves. Their businesses, their social life, their, you know, everything has been interconnected to each other. All of their activities and their life. So they marry to within the military institutions, and they work in this military affiliated business. And a lot of these high level officials are you know, whether owner of these military businesses, or they have their own businesses given by the militaries, like granted by the military institution. So there is you know, the social factor as well as economic factor that they have to consider. And if, you know, I think these are like these how do we say that, the military's systemic or very strong the ecosystem that they were able to build for their own institutions, that itself is a barrier for high-level military institutions, individuals to defect. Otherwise, if they are going to take that risk, they are afraid of losing their businesses or harming their family members, and there may be many other sort of you know, calculations around it. And it was also because of the ecosystems that the military, Burmese military, is able to create over the past several decades. And that is why I think it is important that targeting the military's business is a key in this fight.
We are going to try and answer just a few more. Hannah, this may be a little bit geared more towards you, since it's a slightly more of a policy question. Is there anything being done by the US government to minimize international company support of the military regime? Specifically thinking Chevron, but we know that there are others. We saw the petition that our friend Simon Billness from the International Campaign for the Rohingya dropped in there. That's specifically calling upon Chevron to stop bankrolling the military. Are you aware of any other legislation that is in the works, or any additional Magnitsky sanctions that are being placed upon specific military generals?
It's a great question. My understanding of the strategy is, interestingly, like, I don't, Amber, I know you're asking the questions, but I might actually ask you to share your thoughts on this, because you have more of the corporate accountability like tactic and part of the strategy. And the Jewish Rohingya Justice Network has done a little bit of corporate accountability sometimes, but mostly we're very focused on that the ultimate target of our advocacy is members of Congress or members of the administration. So our ultimate target, as like when we do unified actions, hasn't as of yet been a company or an enterprise. So I might actually turn it back to you.
Well, of course, we've been working with some national and international partners on lobbying specific companies, in particular Chevron, and doing advocacy campaigns. We have also done some outreach as a sort of a coalition of nonprofit organizations and NGOs to our legislators, almost kind of beating them over the head a little bit, that this is going to be the way that's really going to best dismantle the military structure. And it's all well and good that we have placed some sanctions on top military officials and their family members and their businesses, but it's not enough. These companies have to understand and recognize that they are part of the problem. And they need to understand that their bottom line is not more important than human lives. I turn back to the petition. If kind of that corporate accountability area is an interest of yours in a way that you want to get involved, thank you, Simon. He's always right there. I super appreciate it. Sign that petition. Call these businesses. Just as the way that you would call your legislators, call the business the headquarters, and let them know that this is something that they need to have on their radar if they don't already, and this is something that they need to actively, proactively take part in removing themselves from this location. And so hopefully that answered the question. Caught me a little off guard there, Hannah. Thank you. So I think we're going to try and get to one more. I know we're a little bit over, but we wanted to get to as many questions as possible. There was a question. So the Rohingya justice advocacy space is being led in a large part by Rohingya women like yourself, Weiwei. Can you talk a little bit about why you believe this is so and how women have been a major target of the genocidal campaign in Myanmar?
So when I started my work, it was in 2012, right after my release from the prison after 7 years of imprisonment. And at that time, I was a political activist. I was doing a lot on the democratic awareness and activism along with other former political prisoners and young people in Myanmar. But then when the Rohingya, the violence occurred in Rakhine State, the Rohingya were targeted, I realized there wasn't, the women voices were missing. And the Rohingya were portrayed as, the really not even human, right? You name it, many forms of labeling them, as bad people, rapists, and blah, blah, blah. Everything is very, very patriarchal. And I thought, if I can fill a gap and, provide some perspective from Rohingya women, and so that we can change the narrative itself, the hate narratives. And when I came out as Rohingya, I mean, among politicians in those days, they know that I am a Rohingya because my father was part of the democracy movement. Mm-hmm. And in before the 2010, he was an ally to Aung San Suu Kyi. He was an elected parliamentarian in 1990 elections. As a Rohingya, he was part of this 18 political leaders across the country come together to fight against the military dictatorship at that time as a committee called Committee Representing People Parliament, which is similar to CRPH today. So through his activism, I was known, my family was known already as Rohingya among the politicians and activists. But among public, nobody knew that we were Rohingya. Not many people knew that we were Rohingya. But then when I came out publicly as Rohingya and people started to change their perspective and their mindset, the Rohingya are not just that people that they think as an alien and bad people, criminals, and they can be someone like me, like ordinary people, like the way that people, someone that they see every day, like just like them, right? And the way there is a reason behind why the Rohingya become, in terms of poor, in terms of education and economy and social status. And people started to relate and able to understand the context better, although we didn't get enough support to prevent the genocide, although we weren't able to prevent the genocide, but yet it's give them some perspective and some mitigate their narrative, the narrative up there, and basically show human face of the Rohingya to the people day-to-day life by communicating with them. As I was privileged to grown up in Rangoon, the economic city of Myanmar, and as I was based and my activism and my organizations is based in Yangon. But my mission was there. Yes, I have responsibility to protect my people, to work on my people, and we do work a lot on the protections of Rohingya. But on the other hand, my mission ultimately is to create a nation, a country that everybody can live freely with equality and with peacefully. So a democratic, inclusive democratic future for the country. And that's what I'm essentially doing, like a lot of empowerment among young people in democracy, education, awareness, and peace building across the different communities. So yeah, being a Rohingya, I feel like I have a role and I can play it, I can utilize as my being a woman or being a Rohingya, being like using my space and my role effectively to protect my people. On the other hand, I'm an activist. My goal is to create a better nation. That's it. But the nation that secure justice for everybody, that's assured equality and rights of all.
Thank you. Well, we are at our time. I would like to thank everyone who took time out of their evening or their morning, their afternoon, wherever you are coming in from around the world today. Thank you for taking the time and being here. And of course, thank you to our panelists, Weiwei and Hannah and Marcus, and to the Indianapolis JCRC and the Crane Center for hosting us tonight. If you have any questions, feel free to provide them in our social medias. You can find us all on Facebook and Twitter. Thank you and have a good evening. And panelists, if you could just stay on.